Hello, I am making this video to show you a little bit of kind of a preview of some of the higher level lessons in Qkids, because normally we are assigned the same range of levels, if that makes sense. When I first was hired with Qkids, I was mostly teaching the lower levels, levels 1, 2, 3. I don't think I really went over 3, or maybe I don't even know if I went over 2. And I really loved those levels. They were great. Then they had a whole bunch of insect lessons that were kind of seasonal, where we would teach the kids about caterpillars and butterflies, whatever, insects. So after a while, I really was curious about the higher levels, and I asked my trainer if I could teach the higher levels at some point, or at least mix them in sometimes with the lower level. So pretty soon after I asked, they started assigning me mostly all higher levels. So as you can see, this is my schedule for today. I taught these classes this morning. And so L6 means level 6, L9, level 9, level 9, level 9. So typically now I teach from level 6 to level 10. So I want to show you just an example of a higher level course in case you're interested in teaching it, if you're a Qkids teacher, or if you're just curious, what it's like, or if you are assigned these levels and want to know the best way to go about them. So I personally am not that big a fan of level 6 classes. To me, they're not high enough and they're not low enough. So it's kind of a weird level, and the kids sometimes seem a little, I don't want to say bored, but sometimes they just don't seem very interested in lessons. And sometimes, honestly, the lessons are a little repetitive, and it's, you kind of have to keep them interesting on your own. Not all of them. Just several of the level 6 lessons are not my personal favorite. The level 9s and 10s, I really start liking those a lot more because there's a lot more reading. There is usually a story. There's usually some kind of interesting, either nonfiction or fiction story where the kids can read more, answer questions, and actually really think about what they're reading. So to give you an example, this one I actually taught twice today, so it's fresh in my mind. And anyway, so I'm going to go into this lesson. Like I said, this is a level 9. And these kids are usually around 10, 11, 12 years old. Just depends. I have had younger kids in these levels. I think I've had an 8-year-old maybe. So they're not, they're still kids. They still like to have fun. I do my introductions a little differently with older kids. And if you watch my other video where I use all of my little props, and I show them our props, and we talk about them, and we still do that with the older kids. I'm just not as animated. I'm not going to treat them like they're 5 years old. So sometimes I'll just say, "Do you know what this is?" And usually they always know it's ice cream. I'll say, "Do you like ice cream?" And some will say no, and I'll say, "No, why not? I'll say, "What do you like?" or "What kind?" Because they can answer more questions. You can have more conversation, or you can say, "What's your favorite flavor of ice cream?" And you could say, "What other desserts do you like?" Or "Where do you make desserts? Do you buy desserts? You can carry on more of a conversation with this level of kids. So I still use props, and it does help, and they still like to see them, and they're still kids, and they're you know, my daughter just turned 13 and she still plays with these. So it's not like they're above playing with or talking about cute little food squishies. And, you know, I use my strawberry and all the same ones that I've used. If you have watched the other video that I made about how to do the introductions. So I do bring them up one by one on the stage like I did before, and, you know, ask them their name, how old they are. Sometimes I'll say, what's your favorite color? And pretty much the same type of thing. Once the class begins, when this is down to 0. So the introduction page, the thing about the higher levels is a lot of times they already know they have to have a background to this. They've already read this story, and I have taught one of the previous lessons to this. Is a story about Matilda and her husband and how they were poor and she wanted a ball gown, and so he used a lot of his savings to buy her a ball gown, and then she borrowed a very expensive necklace from her friend, and she ended up losing the necklace. And so this whole lesson talks about that and what happened when she lost the necklace. So so at the beginning, you know, you really just talk about you know, you make observations. You know, who are they? What do they look like? How have they changed since the last time we saw them? Because any child that is in this particular lesson has already seen these characters in previous lessons. And I forgot what level this was. I mean, I forgot what lesson this was. But anyway, they go in order. So I don't spend a huge amount of time on this introduction screen here, just kind of making observations and getting, you know, previous background knowledge. In this particular lesson, it says recap, which is another background knowledge slide. So this one kind of recaps everything that has happened so far in just 4 little slides. So what I do is, you know, it's hard to listen to a whole group of kids speak at the same time. So even though this says group activity, I do try to call them out one at a time to summarize each of these pictures. So over here it tells you, because let's say you had not taught this lesson before or taught the previous lessons where you don't know anything about this story, this gives you the recap over here. The kids don't see this, but they have already heard the story, read the story, so they should be able to give you a similar summary. So like for the first one here, I will say, okay, Amy, what's going on in this picture? Can you tell me? And she'll say, you know, something like, well, Matilda borrowed a necklace from her friend, Madame F. You know, and I'll say, that's right. And then in this picture, what are they doing, Eric? And then Eric will say, they are dancing at the ball, and she has on her ball gown and the necklace that she borrowed. Very good. And then the third one, what's happening here? Matilda found out that the necklace was missing. And then what's happening here? They couldn't find the necklace, so they spent $40,000 buying a new one. So this should all be stuff that they already knew. They're just giving me a summary or a recap. So then the next section, and I'm going to go a little faster now because, as usual, I can't spend a lot of time on these videos. This is just kind of like, you know, the vocabulary, like the magnify. It is magnify, actually. And it tells you on here, students learned to tailor in previous lessons, so we need to connect the word with so. That's how it's a little different. We're not just saying tailor. You know, what? What does that mean? So we're going to connect it to the word so. So we could say that she was a tailor who would sew dresses for her friends. You know, just whatever. You can just make the connection there. And then this word, debt, you know, that we say the word, then I ask them, I say, what is debt? And if they don't know, you could explain that it's when you owe money. And then, of course, it's easy to connect debt to pay off. You just say, so when you pay off your debt, that means you don't owe money anymore and you have paid what you owe. So you can explain that however you want. And then we have the practice vocabulary. This is how it's different in the lower levels because you don't really play games as much in this level. So I normally let kids read these one by one rather than the whole class reading out this together. So the proper way to do this one would be to read, she is a tailor, she sews clothes. And then, because it tells you up here, this is the word that they need to be using. This one, the tailor is sewing a dress. So you're just making sure that they're using the right verb tenses and the right vocabulary word. And then you do the same thing for this one, where you say, now he has a debt of $1,000. This one, he has paid, when he pays $1,000 to the friend, this one is a little tricky because for me, if I were to say when he pays $1,000 to the friend, he will have paid off his debt. That's how I would say it. But as long as they understand the connection there. So then this one, you're going to see a lot of this in the upper little levels. This is basically a story. And I let them take turns reading the story. So it says debt $40,000, the story of Matilda part 5. So obviously they have already read parts 1 through 4. And then you just go in order here. And you ask, like I'll just ask one of the kids, I'll say, okay, what would this be? The couple, and what they should tell you is that they moved out of their apartment. And then I'll say things like, do they look happy to move out of their apartment? Where do you think they're going to go? You can ask them those kind of questions. This one, the couple moved into an attic. So you're just kind of questioning the kids and seeing if they understand what's happening. And you can kind of guide them with all this information over here because this is what's actually happening in the story. So you go to each page and you kind of do the same thing. You just guide them along. And then it says at the bottom, to be continued. So obviously there's more to the story. Then there's new vocabulary. We talk about the difference in real and fake. So real dog, fake dog. Because in the story, it will come into play later. Worth. And I'll say the water bottle is worth $1. And a diamond is worth lots of dollars. And we talk about that. The word recognize. So you talk about how your phone can recognize your face. And you can use other examples too. Recognizing a person that you know in a picture or anything like that. So then they get to practice the vocabulary that they just learned. Kind of like in the lower levels where they get to practice like with, I can't even think of some of the games, but maybe like the bingo or the connect the bubbles game, something like that. So I would have a student read the phone, and then they decide what word should go here. Recognizes him. This is his phone. If they struggle with this, I go ahead and give them the answer because, they just learn the word and it is hard. You could imagine learning a new language and learning the word recognize. And then, so she can recognize him. A lot of it's about using those correct verb tenses as well. The same thing with this. You just fill in the blank. Okay, there may have been like a little mix up there. I was trying to do something with this video and I'm sorry. What I want to say about this is that I'm going to explain it in another video because I am running out of time, and this is worth talking about because this is very important in the upper lessons. So just stay tuned to my second video on this particular lesson. Thank you.